Does anyone want to do anything, or should I just start? Okay, great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're running well ahead of our appointed time. So if there was an award for on-time performance, we have missed that by a long margin. I know many of you have flights to catch, so I'm going to get right down to it. Thanks very much for joining us here today. What we are going to discuss is what the road ahead looks like for Indian aviation. We've got all the stakeholders here, the key stakeholders, who are going to give us their perspective on demand on the road to profitability, as well as their expansion plans going forward. I think a lot of you have heard from the Minister this morning. The government is very confident and optimistic about the road ahead, and hoping that there will be a pickup in demand. We've also got several changes, crucial changes coming into effect from the end of this month, with the international travel restrictions easing. Scheduled commercial international travel will resume, will restart as normal, as pre-COVID. But you also have the oil shock to deal with at this point in time, and that is clearly the big worry and the big cause for concern. So without further ado, let me get straight to it. Ajay Singh, I promised you I'll aid you to make your flight this evening. So let me get straight to it. And Mark, I'll come to you as well, because I know that you've got a flight to catch. So let me start by asking you about exactly that. The demand situation is looking better. We're almost back to about 80% of pre-COVID levels at this point in time. But the big worry and the big concern is what happens to oil. Now, this long pending demand and long-winded ask of bringing ATF under GST, I mean, is there any realistic hope that that's even going to happen? And if not, then what's the outlook? What should we realistically expect in terms of the financial impact?
Well, we all live on hope, Shireen. I mean, we've been
Still,
in this sector.
after all
Look
this
at how
time.
optimistic we are. We've been talking about this for more than 15 years now.
Yes.
It's the same thing over and over again. I mean, no country in the world does not include ATF under a central taxation ambit like the GST. And it's really counterintuitive that a country which aspires to be a global aviation leader should handicap its airlines in so strongly to say that, look, here is an input tax that we will charge you, and we will give you no input tax credit. It's actually, for most countries around the world, it's unbelievable. The fact that there was little assistance provided to the aviation sector during COVID. Airlines around the world tell us that it's shocking how you guys are still around. No assistance, high taxation, low yields, shutdown of the sector. So it's been extremely difficult. I think we had a very positive meeting with the Honorable Finance Minister a few weeks back. We put all these issues before her. It's not only bringing ATF under GST, it's also the excise duty. There's a 11% excise duty. Of course, the excise duty was hiked at a time when oil prices went down. Now, of course, oil prices are at a record, and excise duty is not coming down. So we need to, be very, very cognizant of the fact that the aviation sector has suffered huge losses. It's a chronically ill industry. I don't know what the hell Vinay Dubey is doing, trying to put more planes
I'll ask Vinay Dubey
and creating
exactly
a new
that.
airline at this time. But it's a chronically ill sector. It has great potential, but we need to get the cost base right. It's just that, it's not only the fuel, it's, suddenly imposed IGST on parts that we are repairing overseas and getting back. In every which way there's a squeeze. If you look at GST, that's being charged to us, we have large amounts of credit, all of us, which is accumulated. And at the same time, there's a lot of pressure from the GST department, which says that, okay, fine, you guys have got credit, very good. You use the credit over the next 3 years, but the amount that is owed to me or to the department has to be paid right away. So in every which way, there is a squeeze. The banking sector says, look, this is a sick sector. I'm not going to lend you any money. I'm not going to give you any more, anything by way of future credits. In fact, the credits that you have today, I need some of those limits to be reduced.
Even with the new ECLGS?
So you have an ECLGS, which is, I think the aviation sector has used about 250 crores of that money. The losses actually amount to thousands of crores. If you look at losses over the last 3 years, they probably amount to, and if you count this year, probably in excess of 20,000, 25,000 crores. So that ECLGS money is helpful, but it's in the larger scheme of things quite irrelevant. But if banks say that, okay, I'll only lend you money if the government guarantees it, that means that aviation sector will get no more than a very, very small sum. My friend Sunil Bhaskaran was saying just at the last meeting that this sector reminds you of that Bollywood movie where that Ajit dialogue, which is that isko liquid oxygen mein dal do. This is the aviation sector. Liquid oxygen mein hum pade हुए हैं. That's right. उसको मरने नहीं, liquid तो उसको मरने नहीं देगा और oxygen उसको जीने नहीं देगा, whatever that the equivalent or the other way around. So it's a look, we need to be serious. It's an extremely important sector. We need that connectivity. We need airlines. We are perpetually asked to connect some city or the other. We are perpetually told that it's extremely critical for economies of the states to have air connectivity. Look at what's happening on air cargo as well.
Yeah.
These are all really important sectors. We keep talking about India being a global hub for passenger traffic. We keep talking about India being a cargo hub for the world. It is not going to work unless you get the basics right. And I think it's time. There's a situation of great urgency. We need to fix these basics without any further delay. We can't wait another 15 years for this to happen.
Okay, we can't wait another 15 years for this to happen, and I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But Ronojoy, let me address a follow-up with you then. Fuel prices are where they are, and it's unlikely that you are going to get any relief from the government, at least as things currently stand. At the retail pump, we're seeing prices move higher at this point in time. That situation aside, what are the levers, if any, that you can exercise at this point in time to try and offset the kind of shock that you're going to have to deal with?
I will answer that question in a minute. But first, I'd like to focus on the bigger picture.
Yes.
And the fact is that Indian aviation, and I think the Indian country as a whole, is in the point at the cusp of a very exciting growth. We've had these cyclical issues. Delta came and went, Omicron came and went. But setting those aside, through all this, we see such strong underlying trends in demand growth. And it's coming from various sectors. It's coming from small SME manufacturing. It's coming from labor moving, from visiting friends and family. India is a big country, and there's sort of almost a mass migration of people and jobs going from one part of the country to another. And all this is very, very exciting for us.
So you get why Vinay Dubey is getting into the business, right?
It's a great business. He will not regret coming into it. I grant you. Indigo has ordered 500 planes. I think this country can support another 2,000 planes. So it's a great sector. And it's not an aviation story, really. It's an Indian economic story. So we're very, very optimistic about the future. Now, fact is, to come back to the near term and the issues Ajay was raising, we're seeing growth, but we're also seeing profitless growth. And let's face it, we pay 21% of our revenue straight to the government in terms of all the taxes. Now, which industry in the world can produce a 21% margin just to pay the government? No one can. So this is an issue that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed immediately. But regardless of all this, I think it's a very, very exciting sector to be in.
It is an exciting sector to be in, and I would imagine that is why people like Vinay are looking at getting into this. But I just want to take that conversation forward since you brought up the demand picture and the demand outlook, Rono, and I'll get Ajay to comment on that as well. Given what we are seeing happen with COVID restrictions easing, with the economy reopening, with businesses starting to pick up pace and momentum, not just over the next 12 odd months, but what do you see as the demand outlook? A structural shift, a structural change in demand over the next few years?
So let's talk of some very large macro level numbers. I think we've been saying that about 7% of Indians fly. Now think of the amount of other Indians who are waiting on the wings almost to fly. And why don't they fly today? Need and income. Well, the need is expanding. As I said, India is a big country, massive migration of population and job seekers from one to the other, so the need is expanding. Income levels are also increasing. So there is a huge amount of potential in terms of this growth, and it's coming from all the sectors, from visiting friends and family, tourism, labor, all of those. So the growth potential is, I think, very, very large. And that thing, we talk about international. Only 65% of Indian international traffic is carried by Indian airlines. 65% carried by foreign airlines. Within that, again, think of the growth opportunities. So during this pandemic, we had demands for charters from Tashkent and Milan and Manila. And we were like, my God, how are all these people traveling there before? Well, the answer is they go one stop to Dubai and they go one stop to Singapore, and now we can take them all non-stop. So even international, there's so much growth. Put it all together. I think this industry in particular is a very, very exciting place to be.
Yes,
Can I
Sunil.
add some
Yes,
numbers?
please.
Yeah,
Please do add some
just
numbers.
to add some numbers,
Yeah.
probably everybody here knows, pre-COVID, there were about 140 million segments sold, in domestic. The first year after COVID, it was 57 million, and this year it's likely to be 84 million. Our understanding, most of us in the sector think that it will be 157 million going forward next year, which is higher than pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and we are hoping that by May we'll come to the same levels. If you see numbers, it's about 85% higher than this year. Big numbers. We talk about 8.5% growth and all. So I think in terms of growth, it's looking very good. But the bad news is also in terms of costs. If you see all the other costs, when you look at costs, you look at consumption and then you look at rate. In terms of consumption, I think Indian aviation, Indian airlines are among the most efficient globally. In any, you can compare us with the best anywhere. It's on the rate that we have an issue. We have an issue of 21% indirect tax, because of which, although, you can say 60-day out a railway ticket compared to an air ticket, a railway second class would be comparable. But Railways doesn't pay anywhere close to this kind of a direct tax. And what Dono was saying, that you need to make 21% plus to start making, return on your money and get your cash in. So I think the demand is very good. I think Indian aviation is extremely efficient in terms of efficiency numbers. But I think we are really straddled by now the high cost of fuel and the high indirect costs.
Since we're talking about numbers, and you talked about demand as well as what the outlook looks like over the next few months as well as the next few years, what about capital infusion? What kind of capital will this industry require over the next 5 years?
It's interesting. If you see the Indian aviation industry, largely all of us have leased aircraft on our fleet. And depending on the financial balance sheet support, promoter support, it needs very little cash to actually get, for an airline, if you see any of our balance sheets, the fixed cost element is extremely small. So it's that ecosystem of the OEMs who are supporting the airlines to get this going. But the risk is when some airline goes down, it's a very big number which goes down. So in India, it's happened in the past, and that's not good news.
Well,
So
no, it's not good news. Let's not talk about airlines going down. Let's talk about airlines flying again and taking to the skies again. So, Vinay, let me get to you on that. To the points, Ajay Singh believes that there is no place for you to be entering the market at this point in time, and Rona Joy disagrees, says that this is the most exciting place to be. So, I want your hypotheses for why you believe that this is the right time for Akasa to be in the Indian skies.
So my hypothesis, thank you for that. My hypothesis is really very close to Rono's. In fact, almost exactly the same. My view is that if you look 20 years from now, you'll have an extra 1,000, 2,000 aircraft flying. Whether it's 300 more Indigo aircraft, 200 more SpiceJet aircraft, whether Akasa comes, it doesn't come, none of it makes a difference, because as Rono says, this is an India story. This is not an India aviation story. And so given that 20 years from now, we're going to have 2,000 more aircraft flying, our view was, well, why can't a few of those be Akasa aircraft? If we're able to run a good, tight airline, serve our customers well, serve our employees well, we should be able to find our way in creating a robust franchise. So that's really the theory behind it. On the issue of fuel, I completely concur with what my colleagues are saying, but just to give a little bit of hope, and I would request everyone from the ministry to close your ears just for a few minutes, because we still need all of the tax respite that my colleagues spoke about. But in the early 2010s, between 2011, I think, and 2015, there were 4 years of $110, $120 fuel across the world, talking about Brent. But airlines, some of them did find a way to make money. So it could be done. As Ajay said, I live on hope as well. And I would hope that we get both the tax respite, but I also hope that as an industry we find ways for all of us to be able to get to a point where we can make money even at high fuel.
Yeah, well, I'll get to the point about making money in just a second, but let me get Vinod into the conversation as well. Vinod, your flight path at this point in time looks a little uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen as far as the Vistara Air India plan is concerned, whether you'll go together or not. But
that makes two of us.
that's good to know. That's good to know. But by when do you expect clarity on that front?
No, it's something that is still evolving. I think the shareholders probably are in discussion. I'm obviously not involved in that discussion. I think the fact is, as I tell my team, we have a job to do as Vistara. We've established ourselves in over the last 7 years. I think, in fact, credit where it's due to the ministry and the government. We, in fact, launched more routes during the pandemic than before it. So we've shown, and the team has shown amazing resilience to get that done. So our job is clear. We still have about 20 aircraft coming in, and we will continue to take those aircraft, whether it's Vistara or whatever form it is. But at this point in time, I don't think there's any need to speculate. When I know, I shall tell you.
I will not speculate any further. I asked you a direct question. I will leave it at that. But let me ask you, this side of the panel is all dealing with either low-cost or now ultra-low-cost airlines.
No, wait, just for correction, we're a low-cost airline.
Oh, you're not ultra-low-cost? Rakesh said it was going to be an ultra-low-cost airline, so no?
There's no ultra, in Akasa.
Okay, no ultra, so just a low-cost airline. So let me ask you this, Vinod. How challenging is the environment for somebody like you? And is the aviation market in India going to just be a low-cost play, or will we see more room for a full-service carrier as well?
No, I think if you just go back to what Rono and the others were saying, I think the market is going to grow. It's a fact that 80% of the market is currently low cost, and therefore, at least on the domestic space, there are certain constraints or pressures that brings in. But it is a population that is growing. It is a population that is upwardly mobile. And to be very honest, having competition, whether it's Air India or whether it's Jet 2.0 or whatever it is, actually is going to make things better, because the customer will see more options, and hopefully will have the upper middle class and the others moving upwards, transitioning from one to the other. But the fact also is, I just want to comment on the points we made about fuel. It's not just fuel. Fundamentally, going back to Ajay's point, I would think 20 times before starting an airline in India, at least a domestic airline, because your inputs are in rupees, which is a depreciating currency, and 70% of your costs are in US dollars or in foreign currency. So the math doesn't make sense. But still, here we are. We are eternal optimists, whatever you call it, and we have weathered the storm, partly because of the support from the Indian customer, partly because of our resilience. But there is definitely hope at the end of the tunnel.
Well, and that is what we have to look at this point in time. But Mark, you've heard what the airline CEOs have to say, both in terms of what the outlook is and how confident they feel at this point in time about demand. There are, of course, structural issues which continue to weigh on the sector. But this is an exciting market, and I would imagine that this is a market that you're betting on as Pratt & Whitney.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think we can all echo the thoughts expressed on taxation. Taxation on the aviation industry is a brake on the Indian economy. So it's best to release the brakes and let the aviation sector thrive, and the Indian economy will thrive. There's a secondary effect there. Normally, the airline industry success correlates with economic success for the country as a whole. We see the Indian market growth being a tremendous opportunity long term. We're the largest engine provider in India today, but it's a very competitive marketplace for all the OEMs. But the market is big enough, I think, to give all the OEMs a significant piece of the business going forward. And as Pratt & Whitney, we're determined to be there in the market in the future and compete aggressively.
Mm-hmm. What kind of growth are you anticipating for India? What's the assumption that you're working with?
So, we revise our models constantly, and COVID has kind of thrown a wrench in the works for everyone. But I would say our expectations are in line with the numbers that have been discussed on the various panels this week.
Okay. Great. Mohammed, let me come to you now. We are going to see a resumption of commercial international travel in India by the end of the month. It has been a difficult, challenging time for the global aviation sector as well. As Emirates, and you've sort of been long-term partners here for the Indian aviation story, what's the outlook going forward?
Thanks, Shaheen, and thanks for putting me with all my Indian careers colleagues. That means we are part of this story. And yes, from 27 March, we are back to 100% schedules, and we are putting all our capacities immediately. That's immediately 70% increase on our seats. We used to operate 29% during the bubble, and now we are going 100%. So there's a big increase. And I second Dotto on we are on a verge of high demand, and immediately we show it. As soon as we load our flights on the system, they're picking immediately. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a VFR, whether it's a business travel, MICE is actually, there's a lot of demand coming for MICE. Corporate, yes, maybe it might take time, but it's also coming up. So we're going into a very good seasons coming up. Yes, we had a challenging 2 years in the past, but it's looking very positive going forward.
Well, that's good to know that you're already getting booked out, even as you've restarted your bookings for India. Mark, I just signal to me when you need to leave. I know that you have a flight to catch, so okay, if you're good. Murray, let me ask you about your take as far as the Indian aviation story is concerned, and of course the world is moving more and more towards digitization, and that hopefully will bring down costs as well for this sector. So your outlook for India as we look ahead.
Yeah, I think I guess all of the airlines here are really customers of ours in the sense of we provide digital and IT services in the airports to, hopefully arrive at more customers and happier customers through the journey process. So what I think is one of the key things in the growth in India in particular is to, make those airport processes much smoother, much more efficient, using more self-service, more things like biometric and facial recognition technology, so that you can put more customers through the same airport. Even though airports are expanding, of course, the nature of demand growth and the sort of post-COVID latent demand, I think means that you need to get more passengers through the airports more smoothly. And so that is more self-service, more automation, better security processing, so you don't end up with queues and dissatisfied passengers. So I think we're in the middle of all of that. Some of it's still to come. A lot of it's now being put in place. But I think it's very valuable to every airline, of course, because, the rubber hits the road at the airport and the airport process. So we are hopeful that in our contribution to the airline product that we can achieve the growth that I think all of the airlines here are looking forward to.
Yes, and happier customers is certainly what we want. But Rono, let me come back to you and talk about what we should now expect as far as domestic expansion is concerned. The government has set out an aggressive path in terms of airport infrastructure and setting up new airports, including the big greenfield airport that's coming up at Jewar. So what is that going to mean when we talk about companies like yours aligning yourselves to the government's infrastructure vision from a connectivity point of view?
Infrastructure is a very key part of the growth, and it will either enable the growth or it will handicap the growth. And let's be frank, right now, infrastructure is a handicap. And the point we've been making over and over again, if someone is going from Australia to Europe, they can fly over Dubai, they can fly over Singapore, or they can fly over our hubs in Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi. And what will make that choice is how long is that flight? And the fact is, Singapore, Dubai, these are very efficient airports. And passengers can get through them in 60 to 75 minutes. Think of our infrastructure. You have to change terminals in Mumbai and Delhi, and all of that takes 2 to 3 hours. So we are simply not competitive. So for us to grow, infrastructure has to grow. So one way of looking at this is not a story of Indigo versus Air India versus Akasa. This is a story about making the India growth story work. The India growth story has to be as good or better than the China growth story. And for that, all of us are here together. all the airlines, all the airports, all the MROs. We have to be efficient to make sure that the potential that is there, we actually realize it by working together.
And that's an important point that you make, and Ajay Singh, I want you to comment on that also in light and context of the fact that there's been this back and forth on bilaterals and, you know, what should we do, should we review, should we renegotiate, you know, to the point on competitiveness and how do we actually enhance India's competitiveness, and the second aspect as far as bilaterals are concerned, which I know is an issue that you've been passionate about.
Yeah, see, firstly, I just want to say something positive as well on the infrastructure side. On the infrastructure side, if you look at it, look at the way the government has worked on the Udan scheme.
Yeah.
There were all these airports which were sitting around all over the country not being used. And they came up with this innovative scheme where they said, fine, we will use this airport and we will give you all these tax breaks if you fly to these airports. And we will also top up any losses that you might make through a VGF. And by doing that, the government has suddenly added 60 more airports in the last 3 or 4 years to India's aviation map. So that's great credit to them. And all these little towns which were never connected before. Today, SpiceJet runs 70 flights every day to airports which were never connected. So that's great tribute to how the airlines and the government can work together to make a scheme really work for our country. Now, in terms of bilaterals, look, my view is that a country India's size, 1.3 billion people, one of the fastest growing aviation markets in the world, needs to have its own hubs. It needs to have its own global carriers that can take Indians directly to destinations in Europe and the US. To the extent that we can bypass the incredible hubs that these guys have created, and all credit to them, and we are very proud of what they did. But it's time for India to take its share of the business. This applies to both the passenger business, it applies to the cargo business. It cannot be that most of our traffic, whether it is passenger traffic or cargo traffic, has to hub through Doha or through Dubai or through Abu Dhabi. We need our own hubs, but for that to happen, of course, we need to have efficient hubs. It should be a pleasure to transit through India. It is not currently, and it definitely needs to be. We need to have airlines. We have the best airlines in the world, one amongst the most efficient airlines in the world. It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure when we used to fly Jet Airways directly to London. It's a pleasure when you fly Vistara to London. All of us are going to fly international.
What did you fly here this morning?
I flew Indigo actually. Wonderful flight, very nice. I flew Indigo, and I'm very happy. And these are all our national carriers with our flag on them. Very happy to fly them, and they are actually really efficient. I mean, if you guys have ever flown in the US, you know how efficient and professional our airlines are. So I think we have a great opportunity to fly international, long haul, medium haul, do this directly, take our customers directly, and there is no reason why the wonderful airports that we've built at Delhi, at Mumbai, at Bangalore, these should not become global aviation hubs. We just need to make that happen, and we need to work together for that. And Hyderabad today I came, brilliant, wonderful airport. Why can this not be an international hub? It's right in the center of the country. It needs process improvement, and it needs all of us to work together, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it.
Vinod, I want you to weigh in on that. I mean, how do we make it happen? The aspiration is there, the ambition is there, the willingness is there, the commitment is there, but there's still a long distance, as Rono was pointing out. How do we make it happen?
No, most importantly, the demand is there. You have the passengers who are willing to fly. I think that's the biggest part, which perhaps some of the other countries don't have. So what is needed to make it happen? I think we've spoken about it. The fact is, firstly, we know where the deficiencies are. And again, under the ambit of the ministry, we are having discussions with the airports, whether on a bilateral basis or on a collective basis, to see what some of the processes need to change. And again, to be honest, it's probably not just the people around here. Some of this goes beyond to other ministries, other areas. So there are a lot of other areas that are involved, but the good thing is we know where to start. We all know, we've all been through other airports, we know how things work. The commitment to change is also there. I think it's going to be a gradual process. The fact is, and to Rono's point, yes, he having such a big share of the market, he's spread across multiple terminals, and that's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. We just need to find a way to bridge and make sure that a passenger from one terminal to the other is not inconvenienced. I think that is ultimately what is needed. Yes, it requires investment, but I think the focus of the direction is very clear. Even in fact, this morning in the minister's speech, it was very clear on what his view of the country and the future growth is. So I don't think it's a matter of not knowing what to do. I don't think it's a matter of commitment. It's just a matter of getting the thing done.
Yeah, it is about getting it done. But Rona, what we saw through the course of the pandemic in terms of the way that cargo suddenly took off, if I were to ask you to forecast for us, what could be potential ancillary revenue opportunities for companies like yours looking ahead and looking at the growth story, what could they be?
Cargo is a very, very good growth story. 95% of Indian cargo used to be carried by foreign carriers. Think of that. Only 5% was carried by Indian carriers. Now, fortunately, the government has been active in this and has stepped in to prevent foreign carriers from using India as a transshipment point, and many foreign cargo carriers, as a result, have reduced the capacity. At the same time, we have a growth in both India's export volume and India's import volume. So you have an underlying growth as well. Thirdly, we are fortunate to have export-oriented nations around us, Bangladesh, Vietnam. They are very strong export countries right now, and they have a shortage of capacity. So you put it all together, international, put together domestic, all the e-commerce that's coming in place. So cargo is a very good growth story overall. All of us, I think, in one way or the other, are expanding capacity. Indigo, in particular, is committed to getting 4 new freighter aircraft. So overall, whether it's with our belly cargo or freighter aircraft, we think cargo is a good story. So whenever we talk about all this, we see opportunities, opportunities, opportunities. And then it's all just a question of teamwork for the whole ecosystem to work together to make it happen. So even in cargo, the issues of warehousing and self-handling, but I'm sure they'll be addressed.
Yeah, and it's not an ancillary opportunity. Cargo is a business which is as large as the passenger business. And there's no reason why India should not be a major. You know, the boat that we missed on the passenger side, we should not miss on the cargo side. Government has already acted to take away some of the open sky norms that they had. Imagine an open sky norm in passenger traffic, where a foreign carrier could potentially come into our country, pick up passengers from here, take it to a third country. That's what's happening in cargo today. And that needs to, we need to relook at that if we are to build our own cargo industry. But for that to happen, again, there are infrastructure issues. This needs to be taken much more seriously by airports. You need to create handling facilities. You need to create parking facilities for aircraft which are near the handling facilities. As an airline which actually put in place 20 cargo aircraft during COVID, I can tell you that the potential is absolutely immense. Immense. There's no question about it. But again, as Rono was saying, we all need to work together to make this a reality. And the government, which is actually looking at this extremely seriously, needs to take some more policy decisions to ensure that India, which was actually just less than 5% market share and has grown to about 10 or 12% now, gets closer to a 50% share, which is what we should have of our own business.
Right. Gentlemen, let me get Sunil and Vinay to comment on this, and I'll get others on the panel to chime in as well. To Rono's point about the fact that there is headroom for growth and plenty of opportunities, but how long will this industry be able to deal with profitless growth? And in light of the lessons from the past, costs being what they are, and that's just a reality that we're going to have to live with. Indigo did show the way in terms of being able to deliver profits with costs being what they are. But given the current environment, both in terms of costs as well as demand and fares are where they are, what kind of reimagination needs to happen at the back end, Sunil, to ensure that we don't continue to exist largely on profitless growth for the industry?
So, Shirin, that's a very interesting question. I think most of my colleagues here have been in aviation for very long. I've been in aviation for 3 years, and I moved from steel to aviation, and there were many jokes I heard to hear when I moved from steel to aviation. One of them was, moving from one value-destroying industry to another one. Just see what's happened to steel today. I'm sure it'll happen to aviation one day. But having said that, I think on the cost and the efficiency perspective, I think the Indian airlines run one of the most efficient system in terms of real efficiency, utilization, the cost structure, all elements of it, except for what I just said on fuel and taxes. There are two pieces. I think there's a bit of irresponsible competition. I think for too long in India, the fares have been at very low levels, even at these taxes and these fuel rates, which have become almost like taken for granted. I don't think the airlines have tested what could be the potential on the on the ticket side, on the revenue side. Now a little bit, because all of us are constrained by the fuel prices. So I think we will see some of on the fare side, some increases forced by what the fuel levels are for it to happen. And again, if you go back to your MBA schools, I think for 50 years or for 60 years, aviation was seen as an industry which always lost money. And the question was, why would anybody get into aviation? Like I'm sure Vinay gets asked every day. So, but the point is, if you see the US, till 2015, they didn't make money. But after 2015, till prior to COVID, I think even getting over fuel prices of up to $140, the entire industry started being profitable, and they had excellent balance sheets before COVID. So I'm sure the same thing will happen in India, because like Vinod said, I think what we have, what the others probably don't have, many other countries don't have, is the demand. If the demand is, the numbers, I think the number of Indian people who travel is about 35 million, not the 140 million tickets that got sold. This is less than 3% of India's population. If you see any cross-section of, India's middle class, you can have numbers from 300 million to 400 million. If one person travels, one ticket return, it's 600 million, 4 times. On infrastructure you talked about, I think India is hugely supply constrained. Every time you heard about the numbers of Hyderabad and Bangalore and the capacities, what it was built for and what it went into very quickly. So I think the moment these new airports come, you will see that explosion. And I learned this 10, 12 years ago when you were looking at China, that when you're growing at 5, 7, 7.5%, infrastructure is always going to get used up very quickly. So what looks like huge infrastructure, whether it's roads or airports or whatever, every 3, 4 years it will get constrained, because that's the economy we are going to be.
Yeah, and that is what is crippling the industry at this point in time, or one of the things that's crippling the industry at this point in time. Vinay, any reimagination that needs to happen? Can there be any room for further reimagination, given the fact that there is unanimity here that you guys run the most cost-efficient businesses?
No, I think there's always room for reimagination and reinvention. I think complacency is going to be the death of any business. So I don't think anyone over here either is or wants to be complacent, and so I think there's always room for us to do more. I think when it comes to higher fuel costs, or when it comes to profitability, clearly it needs to come both from the cost side as well as the revenue side. And I think Sunil talked about fares being one of the enablers of airline profitability. I think the other part, and by the way, just a minor correction, Sunil, my former employer did make money between 2010 and 2015. This is Delta Airlines. So it can be done with high fuel prices, but it will take some reimagination. I think the other part that all of us, and it's, as Rono says, it's an entire ecosystem over here that needs to work together, is a greater use of technology in everything that we do, whether it's predictive maintenance, whether it's increased self-service at the airports, whether it's better technology in terms of customer interfaces, etc. I think more fuel efficiency in the engines, more fuel efficiency in air traffic management, for example. There's amount of fuel that's wasted by airlines circling, waiting to land, or in the navigational paths, both in terms of altitude and flap settings, etc. So I think the greater use of technology is something that I think will help drive additional profitability, that we are still not yet at the level of other Western carriers, which is an area that I think we ought to look at ourselves as a way of reinventing what we can do for profitability.
So, Rona, let me come to you on that. One, I want to ask you to the point that Sunil made, are the days of irresponsible competition behind us or behind the industry today? And two, in terms of reimagination, what could change in the playbook? Costs, you have no control over, fuel you have no control over, GST you have no control over. On the things that you do have control over, what can you change, if anything?
The airline industry really is a game of inches. It's not like, oh, we've got this wonderful treasure chest that we can go after. So whether it's engine maintenance cost, you have to turn the dial just a little bit and get better. If it's employee productivity, you have to turn the dial a little bit. If it's a mix of international versus domestic, I'm very optimistic about that. Before COVID, 25% of our capacity was international, and it was the highest margin business that we had. In 4 years from now, we'll be 40% international. And again, we'll be the only non-stop carrier flying to many destinations. So I think the answer won't come from any single source, but really it's a game of inches and getting better in every little piece. So I agree with Vinay on that. You have to look at every little piece in this equation.
Ajay?
I think I concur with both Vinay and Rono, but I think we still need to. I'm still hopeful that we can fix the basics, the taxation issues, and so on, because I think this thought process that flying is for the rich. I think that's changing, and the government increasingly and the MPs and the political leadership wants us to fly to different destinations. And they all sympathize with us when we say that, look, here is something which is dramatically wrong and you need to fix it. It's just that we need to give them that final push, and if we can do that, I think we can reduce cost. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity to increase revenue. I think it's just a mindset issue. This time when the fuel prices went up, airlines took up fares. When airlines took up fares, I started getting messages saying, these are extortionate fares. What have you done? These are extortionate fares. I think it's just a matter of getting used to fares. People have got so used to paying less for a flight from Delhi to Mumbai than they pay for a taxi fare from airport back home. That it's become like a mindset. And I think you go for a dinner, Shireen, and you easily spend 5,000-6,000 rupees on that dinner. But if we ask you to spend that 5,000-6,000 flying Delhi to Mumbai, you'll say this is too expensive because I'm used to paying 3,000 rupees. So I think it's a matter of getting used to somewhat higher fares, and it's a matter of also our revenue managers at airlines holding their nerve and saying, look, let's wait up, even if the bookings have dropped a little bit, let's keep a reasonable fare, because this is one industry which for no apparent reason keeps selling below cost. The basics of any business ought to be that you will at least try and sell above your cost. And hopefully this fuel price increase and the fares that we have increased is a lesson to us that as we increase fares, the bookings really didn't drop off very much. Right?
So the question that he's asking you, Rono Joy, is that are your managers, revenue managers, going to hold their nerve? Are we looking at you as the market? Are we looking at you as the market leader?
Yeah, and as a market leader, I seriously think that if Rono raises fares, all of us will raise fares anyway. So,
excuse me, we don't want to talk about no. I'm sorry. This is not about working together to raise fares.
No, it's not about working together. If they just raise fares, people will follow anyway because they're the market leaders.
Look, we are going to be very, very competitive. And so far we've been talking of the ecosystem working together and we're all friends and we'll all make it happen. That's great. But look, ultimately, IndiGo's strategy is to provide superior customer service and get a disproportionate part of the revenue. So I'm just telling you guys that. I'm not just saying you take your revenue, I'll take mine. We'll provide great service and get a higher share of revenue.
Well done. But on the technology issue, and Murray, I want to get you in on that, because what we heard here from Vinay was that there is a long distance, especially here in India, for us to cover in terms of how we can leverage the use of technology to drive down costs. Where do you believe we are in that journey today, and what could it do in terms of costs going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Vinay's point, we're probably some distance off best practice in technology and digital deployment in airports in particular. Right? So I think there's a lot of improving we can do. I think that improving is critical because if you want to address the issues that the panel has highlighted in terms of the constraints to growth, you really need to use the available and planned airport infrastructure to maximum efficiency. Right? and to provide a good customer experience. Well, all of that is self-service, biometrics, and new security technologies, all those things together, because then you will get more customers through the same infrastructure, not constraining the growth the airlines want, but also with a happier customer or a better customer experience. Right. So the end result is what you want. And I think that's also, if you think of airport infrastructure nationally, I think that's a very good contribution to efficiency. And the common use airport model adopted in India, I think, is the right way to allow airports, to allow airlines to grow most efficiently. And then, to Vinay's last point, I think collaboration between us as a digital technology service provider in airports, the airports and the airlines, of course, is the right way to try and address this thing.
Absolutely. Mr. Mishra, I was getting everybody to give us their comments, their views before I get you to respond to what you've heard from industry and what we can now expect in terms of intervention from the government.
Yeah, Gaurav. See, we listen to the very short-term constraints which the airlines have raised today, in fact. One is related to fuel cost. Second is related to some capacity constraints at the airport. See, if you look at the taxation history itself, whether it was a direct tax or the indirect tax, over the period the taxation has reduced. Even during the high taxation period, the airlines were making profit, they were surviving. During the high fuel cost, let you take 2015-14, airlines survived. During the pandemic time, again, when all the problems were there, they were not able to fly, they were able to survive. So we are quite hopeful that this sector is quite resilient and it is going to have a big growth. India is a big market. As far as the government is concerned, government is aware about their constraints. Government is taking with the other ministries regarding the excise part. Regarding the infrastructure bottlenecks also, that is also being worked upon. So government is facilitating on all the fronts that they can take it forward and this industry survives. Another thing I would like to say there, see, nobody can predict what is going to come next, in fact. But some of the things which are coming in future, and that is about the carbon reduction part.
Yeah.
And airlines are aware that the huge cost is going to be imposed on them. Now this is the time when we have to think. What is the thinking? Not only in the terms of sustainable aviation fuel, that is not the only answer, in fact. Because as far as I know, the India doesn't have that much capacity to take care of the airline need, in fact. But what the airlines have to think about the efficiency of the airplane itself. This is one of the points where the goal was given even by the ICAO also, that over a period 2% of fuel efficiency or this carbon reduction should come from efficient airline.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened. Perhaps some of our members, they talked about the engine efficiency and fuel efficiency. My only thinking is that airline have to think in those terms and they should not be caught unaware what is going to come in next 4-5 years. As far as the government is concerned, government is providing all kinds of support, government is seized of the matter, and in all fronts we are working on it, and definitely the solutions are going to come.
Well, that's good to hear that there is a sense of urgency within government to address some of the concerns that have been raised. But that's an important point that you brought up, Mr. Mishra. And Ronald, let me get you as well as Mark to comment on that. The move towards more sustainable aviation, and as he points out, it's not just about sustainable aviation fuel, also what that will mean in terms of additional costs to an already burdened sector. Your thoughts on that and how you intend to mitigate some of that risk?
So clearly, we have a very challenging target of us. At IATA, all the airlines committed to zero net carbon by 2050. So we don't have much time left. So how do we get there? We think we have 3 different paths. One is reduce carbon emissions. The second is do offsets. And third is move to sustainable fuel. On the reduce carbon emissions, I'm proud to say that Indigo in the last 5 years has reduced carbon emissions by 16%. which is a pretty impressive number. It's not only in the engines. We fly straight thanks to some of the initiatives by governments, reducing the flying time. On ground equipment, we are going green as fast as we can. So with that, we've reduced 16% already. We are moving ahead aggressively. On carbon offsets, we are planting acres and acres of forests, mostly in the Northeast. We have put up about 30 biogas plants all over the country. So we are moving also aggressively on offsets. The third one is the most promising, but it's a little far away, is sustainable aviation fuel. And as you can imagine, it's a price versus volume issue. So we talk to all the oil companies, and they say, if you give us enough volume, we'll bring the price down. But right now, the price is 3 times as high. So we are working on all of that. As you might have read, recently we had a SAF flight from Toulouse to Delhi, which was our first SAF flight, and we plan to do more of that. And then, to get to all those numbers, we desperately need help from the engine manufacturers. The airlines are not going to be able to do it on their own. We're great. We are really happy with the new generation engines, but we need more engine improvement as well. So, like everything else, this is a complex problem. It needs a myriad of solutions, but we are working on every angle to try and get there.
Mark, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I agree with Rono. Indigo were a pioneer, really a leader in reducing emissions. They elected the Neo aircraft as a launch customer, and that was an 18% reduction in fuel burn and carbon emissions, which was unprecedented in the industry at the time. So I think Indian aviation is recognized as being a leader on that front. But from the engine manufacturer's perspective, there's a lot of work going on now. As we know, we're flying engines with sustainable aviation fuels already. And for the future, we're looking at evolving technologies, including electric hybrid technologies. And ultimately, long term, we're looking at hydrogen fuel technologies. That's quite a way out, but that's the path that the industry is moving down.
Yes. And as you point out, it's a complex, arduous journey that is going to have to be made. Let me get wrap-up comments from each one of you. Mohammed, you talked about getting ready for action, so to speak, now that we are reopening. What's the plan for the next few years as far as India is concerned?
So, yep, we are very much committed to the Indian market. We've been here since the beginning of the airline in 1985. Bombay and Delhi were the first destinations when we were established. We look for more open skies. We came from a background, Dubai, which is very open skies place. More than 100 airlines operate in Dubai, and we are just one of them. So it's all about the bigger picture. It's not about the airline only. It's all about the ecosystem, what we talked about, infrastructures. Because whatever we build infrastructures, you need people to fly there. You need more and more customers coming there. And that's what we need. We need more of open skies. We spoke about cargo, and some of our colleagues, he left now, my friend Ajay was talking about limiting it to the Indian carriers only. We are against that, of course. We want the Indian exporters to enjoy, the Indian industries to improve and deliver the Indian products all over the world. So yeah, that's one main aspect. UAE and India have recently signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which is more or less a free trade agreement between the two countries. So we are very much happy for that, and we are looking forward for a bigger and bigger cooperation between our both countries.
Yes, that CEPA has recently been inked between India and the UAE. Sunil, do you have a little more clarity than Vinod on what your future looks like with AirAsia and Air India Express?
Yeah, I think we have more clarity, but I don't think we are going to discuss that now. But within us, we have far more clarity.
So what's the plan then going forward?
No, so nothing that, I'm an employee for AirAsia India. I think it's best to ask this to our promoters. They would probably, as and when it's ready to be announced, it will. But everything is going as per plan. That's the only thing I can say.
And confident about the road ahead?
I think we are all very confident of the road ahead. I think the last 2 years have been particularly bad for the industry. One good thing which has happened is there's been a lot of correction of whatever fat was there within the businesses. And so we are just gearing up to see the kind of growth we are seeing today, the kind of demand we are seeing today, and what we are sure is going to happen, starting off next month or month after next. So we just need to fly more efficiently. We need to ensure that our cost base is as low as possible, and ensure we do everything to get the customer to see us as a preferred airline. And I think one of the big things which will happen in India, which we'll surely see playing out over the next couple of years, is I think we'll become digital leaders globally in aviation. And it sounds like a big statement to make, but I'm extremely confident about it.
Well, Murray there is smiling, beaming year to year. I can see that. We know when will Akasa fly? How many aircraft? Give us some indication of what the flight path looks like.
Sure. So we hope to launch our first commercial flight in the month of June. We're working very, very closely with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the DGCA, to get all our licensing done. They've been, challenging but extremely supportive. And it should be challenging, right? This is an industry that is steeped in safety, and so you want to make sure that the processes are extremely rigorous and challenging before the licenses are issued. So first commercial flight in the month of June. We hope to have 18 aircraft on ground as part of our fleet within the 12 subsequent months. And then every year after that, between 12 and 14 aircraft, getting us to about 72 aircraft in 5 years. So we're very excited. We hope to serve a number of people in the audience with really warmth and affection and kindness. And hopefully we'll get to be part of this sort of beautiful sky of ours very soon.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck. Rono?
So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the overall objective here. And I'd just like to state two very sobering statistics. As we are all aware, we have the highest percentage of people below poverty in the whole world. Recently, they measured the happiness index across the world. Finland was number 1. Afghanistan was last at 146. Guess where India was? 136. That's how bad we are. Bangladesh was 94. Now, we all need to fix this problem, guys. I mean, this is terrible. This is unacceptable. So we are all here together. I think civil aviation is a great catalyst for addressing some of these issues. We create jobs, we create the economy to get stronger, we connect people, allow them to move freely for jobs, so we can all make a dent in these depressing numbers. And I think this is what these discussions should be all about. How do we make the India story actually work?
And speaking of depressing numbers, I'm banking on the aviation sector to help us move up on the number of women's participation in the workforce, because that's an equally abysmal number. And we hope that you're going to help on that front.
And I'm also proud to say that Indigo has the highest percentage of women pilots in the whole world.
Well, applause for that. And that is great to hear. Vinod.
Well, I think you would ask me some tough questions earlier on, and I gave you some answers which, for what it's worth. But I think the fact is that, there's always a saying that airlines make a lot of money for everyone except themselves. But I think here on the table or on the stage here, there's scope for optimism. I think there is definitely a strong India story when you look at it in a medium to long-term perspective. I think we will all enjoy the benefits of it. As far as Vistara is concerned, we've established ourselves as the best airline in India in the last 7 years we have, and we hope to continue that for what it's worth.
Best of luck to you as well. Mark.
I think we're just very excited to be a part of this growth story. The atmosphere here at the conference the last couple of days has been very, very positive, and we've had lots of conversations with airlines that are predicting very good businesses this year as we all come out of COVID. So I think it's just a very, very good story.
Well, we hope that the story gets better from here on. Murray.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I think that the last 2 years have been difficult for everyone in our business. Projects and new initiatives and things didn't really take place. But I think in the years ahead, there's great opportunity. Clearly, from a technology point of view, there's all sorts of new capabilities and things that could be introduced to make passengers' lives easier, hopefully making a small contribution to reducing the 136 somewhat, and then obviously making both airlines and airports, work more efficiently. So we're really looking forward to that in the years ahead.
And we're looking forward to the 136 improving significantly. Mr. Mishra, I'll give you the final say, sir.
So another thing which comes to my mind and my feeling is looking at the ministry as a whole, and I work in the area of the bilaterals also.
Oops.
So what we find that we have very little capacity as compared to the foreign airlines. And we have got huge market in the international sector. So my feeling is if some of the airlines, instead of all the airlines competing in the domestic sector, if some of the airlines can focus more towards the international sector and give room to the other smaller airlines in the domestic part and think more towards capacity augmentation. Otherwise, definitely, despite best of the best efforts made by the government, most of the traffic, most of the bilaterals, they are taken by foreign airlines. So this is one area where one has to think, our airlines have to think, and they have to capture the international market rather than focusing more here only. We are hearing about the cargo, and it came to our notice that the exporter is ready, his consignment is at the airport, there is no airline to take the cargo. Again, capacity issue. So perhaps the airlines have to think in the augmentation and they have to think in the long term. This is my final word.
Well, thank you very much. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here to take us through this conversation on what the road ahead looks like for the aviation market. Yes. Before, I think as is very, very clear from what we've heard from the CEOs on this panel today, that the road ahead looks exciting, the skies look bright. There is turbulence, at least in the near term, but the hope is that, that companies will be able to withstand that with not just a little, but a lot of help from the government. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing your stories here with us and for sharing your flight path as well. May I please request Usha Padi, the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Civil Aviation, to please do the honors. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Something to keep your foot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Interesting one.
Thank you. Are we dismissed?
Yeah.
Yeah.